And now a little extra video. This won't be the last you'll hear from Andy Peebles, a former Radio 1 DJ. At one time, a City Stadium announcer, was very close to the club when he worked on Piccadilly Radio, and of course through the years has met many famous people. But he's a City fan. That's of course the reason why I've been talking to him. And in this section, the first section, I asked him about Peter Swales. There are other stories in here as well. But what did he think of Peter Swales, a former City chairman who people of a certain age remember well? But if you're a younger viewer, then he was chairman of City back in the 1970s.
I had one run-in with the chairman, Peter Swales, God bless him, when a fight broke out. I think we were playing Middlesbrough in the Cup, and it all went off. And I grabbed the microphone and said, will the idiots who are besmirching the good name of football kindly behave themselves before they're arrested and stop behaving like a bunch of lunatics? And there was a big round of applause and the trouble ceased. But the chairman called me in at close of play and said, Andy, well done, but I think you took a massive risk because it could have gone the other way and it could have got worse. And I said, Chairman, I'm not going to argue with you. I apologise, but I'm very pleased that it worked. I got very close to Tony Book. He was wonderful with me. I respected him immensely as a player because of the journey he'd taken coming from Bath, you know, and hitting the heights and captaining the side. He used to invite me in for a cup of coffee at about 11:30 on a Saturday morning. I mean, it's weird, isn't it, Ian, talking about it? 3 o'clock kickoff on a Saturday. That was the norm. And you might play on a Wednesday night, but that was the only variation. And I vividly remember that Tony would make a great thing because he liked winding up Peter Swales of giving me the team and saying, I can't give you the bit of paper, but there it is. He said, perhaps if you see the chairman, you'd like to tell him the team. And I realised there was some very naughty schoolboy stuff going on. And we did that a couple of times. But I must be fair and say that the chairman was terrific. When I eventually got the job at Radio 1 in 1978, he got me into his dining room and he said to me, we're really sad about this. Can you not come back on a Saturday and still do the PA? And I said, no, I would love to. I would really love to, but I can't. So I went, and the next thing I knew, I DJ'd for his daughter's, it was either a wedding or a 21st. It was at Noel White's Hotel in Bowden. Noel, who you remember was on the board at Liverpool and was one of Peter's best friends. He owned the hotel. Was it called the White House? I think it might have been. Anyway, I DJ'd and the Swales family and I became comfortably close. I didn't want to get too close to the chairman, that's dangerous. But I was in a very good position because I could take the mick out of him. We had furious arguments over the couple of lunches he invited me to about the allocation of FA Cup final tickets. And I once had the audacity to say to him, I'll tell you what, Chairman, why don't you go over there and take your FA blazer off its hanger and put it on, and then we'll continue the conversation. And he realised what I was implying. And he came back and he said, why are you so upset about this? I said, well, I'm not upset, but it's a golden opportunity to talk to somebody who is part of the upper echelons of the Football Association about the fact that I don't understand why little Watting in the whole football club should be allocated 2 or 4 tickets for an FA Cup final, which has got absolutely nothing to do with them, whereas your club here has got thousands of people who won't be able to go to Wembley next time we get into a cup final because the FA gives tickets away. And Peter said, well, there's only one word, tradition. And I said, okay, well, I accept that. That doesn't mean to say it's right. So we had a lot of fun and we had a lot of banter. And I will now give you what I think is a bit of an exclusive, but I'm not afraid to tell you this story. He invited me for lunch one Saturday and we sat down, and the lovely guy who was his chef, whose name I can't remember, tall lad with dark hair, When we played Vitsolotz, and I hope I pronounced that correctly, he was my interpreter, and he came up in the box and gave me all their phonetically pronounced names. He was a godsend. Anyway, we started the meal, and Peter said to me, "It's great to have you. Thank you for coming." And I said, "It's a pleasure, Chairman." He said, "Well, at least I'm having lunch with somebody I can trust." And I said, "Meaning?" "I haven't got a conscience about telling you this." He said, "Well, I had Stuart Hall here last week." And I said, "Oh, that must have been a joy for you. Did you get a word in edgeways?" And the chairman started laughing. And he said, "No, not really." He said, halfway through the meal, the phone rang and I took the call. And when I'd finished the call, I said to Stuart Hall, "That call is private. You don't say a word about that ever to anybody outside this room." And Stuart Hall walked straight out, went to the press box where he was about to appear on Radio 2 Sport or whatever it was called in those days. And they queued to him from London. And he said, "Welcome to Main Road. All I'm worried about this afternoon is the chairman, who's just placed so many bets on a variety of nags at various meetings across the country, but I fear for his finances." Now, I'm not making this up, Ian. Brenda Swales, Peter's lovely wife, was driving to the match in her car, had the radio on, and at that moment in time had no idea whatsoever that her husband gambled on the horses. She nearly drove off the road with shock. She and Peter, he told me, landed up having, as you can imagine, a pretty big barney about the whole thing. But it was all down to the complete indiscretion of the quite hideous Stuart Hall, a man whose ego could have filled the pitch at Main Road, let alone the stands. I worked with Stuart. I won't go any further than that, but that kind of summed him up. But it also summed up the chairman and what a decent guy he was. And he always used to say to me, "You will come and sit in the director's box, won't you?" And I said, "No, thank you, Chairman. I'll sit with the boys at the back of the press box." There was always a spare seat. I'd sit next to Brian Clark. So I had wonderful memories.
That's interesting. I mean, you've spoken with a lot of affection there about Peter Swales, and there's a lot of City fans of a certain age who obviously remember that era, who only have bad things to say about him because the club, stuttered along. You have a different view then, by all accounts.
No, I don't have a different view about what you've just intimated, because the club very definitely did stutter along. But what I'm talking about is a personal friendship with the chairman. And I have already said to you that I kept the business side of it at a sensible professional arm's length, because I was in a position quite often where I would interview him. Brian Clark did most of the interview work, but occasionally I would interview the chairman, as indeed I built up a tremendous relationship with both Martin Edwards and his father, Louis. Louis used to phone me. Here's a great story for City fans, and this will make them laugh. On a Friday night at Piccadilly Radio, the ex-directory phone, which had a flashing light on it, used to go normally around 10:30, 11:45, and I would pick it up and I'd either be on air or just about to go on air. And a voice would say, "Mr. Peebles?" And I'd say, "Yes, it's Mr. Edwards, Louis Edwards at Manchester United. I'm just phoning to tell you that we've got 250 seats available in the Stretford end, or 250 tickets available in the Stretford end tomorrow. I'd be very grateful if you could put that on air for me," which I did. Not because I was trying to schmooze Louis Edwards, but because it was good public information. And of course, I found it hilarious. Here's the chairman of United phoning up the tannoy man at City, who also happens to work for the radio station, and giving me information. But, I must be fair to him. He treated me like royalty at Old Trafford. I would go and he would have me in the director's lounge after the match. I always made a point of putting a suit, shirt and tie on. Martin was brilliant. Martin would invite me to all the Derby matches as his guest. I vividly remember going to one with Michael Atherton, who by that stage had become a great friend. And you can imagine the banter between the two of us, because he wholeheartedly loathed City and expected me to loathe United. And I don't think I've said this to many people. I have never loathed United. What I vehemently hope is that we will give them a round thrashing every time we play them. But for the rest of the time, I have a small element of affection, because in the 1970s, when we opened Piccadilly Radio, I used to go to a discotheque in Stretford called Sam's. Roger Day and I used to go on a Monday night. And because we talked about this on air on Piccadilly, it became known in Manchester as Boys' Night Out. And the United players latched onto this. And Alex Stepney, who had become a friend by then, said to me, "Is it any good?" And I said, "No, it's just a figment of our imagination, but why don't you come and bring some of the lads?" Well, it culminated about 3-4 months later with pretty well the whole United team turning up regularly on a Monday night. I mean, I got a severe rollicking from Tommy Docherty, who told me that it was a plot and that I was doing this on behalf of City to get his players drunk and useless for training on a Tuesday morning. I mean, it was hilarious. The only thing that wasn't funny about it was that Martin Buchan, I don't know who told him that he could play the guitar, but he could play the guitar. But Eric Clapton didn't have anything to worry about. But Martin would turn up with his guitar and would then lead the community singing. So every Monday I had a taste of the other side of town. I obviously lived through Dennis Law's famous back heel, and I vividly remember the first United match of the following season. I was on Chester Road and I could not believe the number of people. I mean, I can't remember what the gate was for their first game in the lower division, but I suspect it was, well, I mean, again, I'm talking out of school, but I know you like that. The guy who was in charge of the information for the press box at Old Trafford, I think was called Jim. And he would come round and he would, because I sat on the end when I was doing matches for other radio stations, while I was working for Piccadilly, if United were playing Middlesbrough, Radio Tees would phone up and Tom Tyrrell would say to me, "Do you want to cover the match?" And I'd say, "Yeah." So I'd sit on the end and Jim would come with a card embossed with the Manchester United logo at the top, and it would read, "Today's gate, 50,623. And he'd hand it to me, grin and go, "And the rest." And I'd say, "Sorry?" He'd say, "And the rest." And we had a conversation and I always promised him it would be private. But I can tell you that in it, he revealed that the figure which was declared was not a completely honest figure. It won't come as a surprise to anybody. And why should they worry now when they can get 76,000 people in at the drop of a hat? But I had massive, massive affection for Main Road. I remember going out on the pitch and Joe Corrigan, it was a charity game, and Joe Corrigan said to me, "You go in goal and I'll kick in." And the first ball he hit at me knocked me off my feet. I mean, literally, it knocked me off my feet. I didn't save it. I deflected it, but it hit me that hard. It was just fantastic. And the boys all became friends, probably Dennis Stewart, the biggest of my friends. Dave Watson, when I left, gave me one of his England shirts. Tony Book gave me a Manchester City clock embossed with a brass plaque, which I still have. I love the club. What we have now is something from entirely another planet.